Owning a piece of the moon. What sounds more sci-fi than that? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into space real estate, with MD White claims to have some pretty unique access to this whole final frontier thing.
Yeah, everyone's talking about it these days, right? SpaceX, Blue Origin, they're making headlines constantly.
Exactly. And it seems like every other day there's a new company promising the moon and the stars.
Literally. But that's the thing, it's still early days. Gotta be careful, you know? Understanding the potential is important, but so are the risks.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this Medium article by MD White so fascinating. It's called Blast Off into the Future, a Space Real Estate Odyssey. And it's not just hype. He gets into specifics, name-dropping some major players.
I noticed that. We're talking SpaceX, Blue Origin, the usual suspects, but he also mentions lesser-known companies.
Right. Astrospace, think Orbital even.
See, that's what caught my eye. This isn't just about space tourism or putting humans on Mars. It's the whole range, the different facets of this industry that are starting to take shape. You've got SpaceX with their reusable rockets aiming for Mars colonization eventually. Blue Origin, they're all about space tourism.
Yeah.
And then you have these companies like Astrospace. They're focused on making it cheaper to launch smaller satellites.
So it's like MD White looked at the entire space industry and said, I want a piece of that.
It does seem that way, doesn't it? And he even mentions having a dear friend at one of these companies. Apparently this friend gave him some hot tips, helps him expand his investment list.
Insider information, do we think that's legit?
He definitely plays up the personal connections angle. And listen, networking, building relationships, it's huge in any field. But in a world as exclusive as space exploration, who knows? Maybe it's even more critical. But does it guarantee investment success? That's a different story.
Good point. But okay, let's say, just for the sake of argument, MD White really does have this incredible network. How does that translate into actual investments for him? What's he putting his money into?
Well, that's where his article gets even more interesting. We're talking lunar habitats, Martian colonies. He even throws around the idea of orbital resorts. And he's not just talking about it like some far-off fantasy. He's suggesting this is the ground floor, the chance for savvy investors to get in early.
It's a bold vision, for sure. But is it realistic? Are we really on the verge of buying timeshares on the moon?
Let's just say MD White is an optimist. Look, the long-term potential of space real estate is massive. I don't think anyone's arguing with that. But there are some serious hurdles we're talking about. Technological challenges, for one, regulatory uncertainties for another, and then there are the ethical considerations of expanding humanity's footprint into space. We haven't even touched on that.
So maybe hold off on buying that lunar condo for now.
Probably a good idea. But even if his timeline is a little, shall we say, ambitious, his core message is worth thinking about. Space represents a whole new frontier for investment. That much is undeniable.
Okay, so we're talking about an industry that's literally taking off.
Like a rocket.
Exactly.
And like any rocket launch, there are going to be some bumps along the way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So what are some of those bumps? What are some risks MD White might be, I don't know, glossing over in his article? What do you think?
Well, yeah, that's the thing about these opportunity of a lifetime pitches, right?
Right.
They don't always highlight the risks. And in this case, we're talking about some pretty substantial risks. I mean, this is an industry that's still completely reliant on government funding and contracts.
Right.
A single change in policy.
Wow.
Or even just like a failed launch.
Yeah.
Or who knows, another global economic downturn.
Yeah.
It could have a huge impact on this whole sector.
So it's not like investing in like a rental property or
Yeah.
something. You're not just worried about finding a good tenant. You're worried about whether the rocket's even going to leave the launch pad.
Exactly. 100%. And even if a company, let's say, they have the technology down, they have a good track record.
Right.
There's the whole other layer of the regulatory landscape.
Oh, right. We talked about that a bit before, how it's constantly changing.
Right. And it's true, there are these international treaties that everyone's agreed on, but when you get down to the nitty-gritty, like property rights, resource extraction.
Like who owns what.
Exactly. That's all still being worked out.
So it's still kind of the Wild West out there.
A little bit, yeah.
So how does the average person who's listening to this, how do they even begin to evaluate this right?
Yeah.
With all this uncertainty, how do you even approach it?
That's a million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is where I think MD White might actually be onto something, even if his whole, personal connections thing is a little much.
A little over the top.
Yeah. But in an industry as new and as complex as this one, yeah, having access to experts, to the people who are actually doing the work,
Yeah.
that can be invaluable.
Yeah, because you can't just like read a textbook or something.
Right.
It's about understanding the tech, the regulations, everything that goes into it. You almost need like a PhD in aerospace engineering to even scratch the surface.
Well, you don't need a PhD,
Okay, good.
but you do need to be ready to do some serious homework.
Yeah.
Look beyond the hype. Look at the companies, research them, understand their financials, their management team, all of it.
So it's not just about picking stocks.
No.
It's about understanding the whole like ecosystem.
Exactly.
Okay, so for our listeners out there who maybe read MD White's article and were like, sign me up,
Right.
what would you tell them? Where should they even start?
Well, first of all, I would say don't put all your eggs in one basket,
Ugh.
especially not one that's, going into space.
Yeah.
Start small, diversify your investments, and honestly, just be prepared for a bumpy ride.
Because it's not a sure thing.
This is a long game, not a get-rich-quick scheme. But for someone with, a healthy risk appetite and a sense of adventure, it could be an amazing opportunity, a chance to be part of something huge.
I don't think MD White would disagree with you there.
Probably not.
Okay, but let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about the practicality of all of this.
Right.
MD White talks about these lunar habitats and Martian colonies.
Right.
How realistic is that, really? So we're talking about investing in space real estate, but what does that even mean? Like, are we talking about buying a plot of land on the moon? What are we actually investing in?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it gets right to the heart of why this whole thing is so fascinating and so complicated at the same time. Because right now, there's no legal framework for owning a piece of the moon or Mars, for example.
So no lunar land grab just yet.
Not quite. You see, there's something called the Outer Space Treaty, which most countries have signed on to. And basically, it says that space is for everyone. No single country can claim ownership of any planet or moon or anything like that.
Okay, that makes sense. But it also kind of throws a wrench in the whole space real estate idea, doesn't it?
Right. It gets a little tricky. So for now, investing in space real estate really means investing in the companies that are developing the technology, the infrastructure, all the stuff that will eventually make those lunar habitats and Martian colonies a reality.
So instead of buying the land, you're buying the picks and shovels.
Exactly. Think of it like this. You wouldn't invest in a shopping mall if there were no roads, no electricity, no people living nearby, right? You'd invest in the companies building those essential things first. And that's where the opportunity is right now in space.
Right. Build it and they will come.
Basically.
But MD White, in his article, he does talk about these futuristic structures, habitats, colonies, even space resorts. Is he getting ahead of himself? Or is there really a chance those things could exist someday?
I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of possibility. I mean, there are companies right now, today, working on things like inflatable habitats designed specifically for the lunar surface. And then there's 3D printing technology. People are talking about using that to actually build structures on Mars using Martian soil.
Wow. So the building blocks are already there.
It's still early days, but yeah, the technology is starting to catch up with the imagination.
But even if we figure out how to build these things, what about living there?
Right, the practical stuff.
Yeah. The radiation, the lack of air, I mean, all the things we just take for granted here on Earth.
It's a huge challenge, absolutely. But again, scientists and engineers are on it. They're working on things like advanced radiation shielding, closed-loop life support systems that can generate oxygen and recycle water. These things sound like sci-fi, but they're getting closer all the time.
So maybe we're not all packing our bags for a lunar vacation next year.
Probably not.
But it sounds like the journey has definitely begun.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what's so cool about this whole field. It's not just about making money. It's about pushing the boundaries of what humans are capable of. It's exciting stuff.
Maybe instead of inheriting our grandparents' timeshare in Florida, we'll be inheriting their lunar villa.
No, that's a thought.
Definitely something to think about. So to wrap things up, what would you say to our listeners who are intrigued by this whole space investment thing? What's your key takeaway for them?
I'd say this. Space is the ultimate long-term investment. It's not about getting rich or quick. It's about investing in the future. A future where humanity has expanded beyond Earth. And yeah, there are risks, just like with any investment. But the potential rewards, I mean, they're not just financial. They're societal. They're astronomical.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. If you're going to invest in space today, what would you focus on? What aspect of this whole final frontier gets you most excited? Let us know in the comments. And until next time, keep exploring.